Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you know, this is one of the most important pieces of legislation to come before this committee in recent years. And I have to tell you that I am extremely disappointed that you have allocated only 15 minutes for debate. And that means that there are 11 Republicans on your side, 10 Democrats on my side, who will not have the opportunity to give their opinions about this bill before a vote is cast. That is wrong, and it is wrong that the Budget Committee has not yet held a single hearing on this tax bill, not one. But I have to say that I do understand why the Budget Committee, and in fact the Finance Committee, has been so reluctant to hold public hearings to engage the American people in this debate. And that is because this legislation is a disastrous and unfair piece of legislation which gives huge tax breaks to the people who need it the least, the very, very wealthy. It raises taxes on millions of middle-class families at a time when the middle class is struggling. It leaves 13 million more Americans without health insurance while raising premiums 10% a year when we're already paying far higher prices for health care than any other country on earth. It raises the deficit by $1.4 trillion. You know, how many hours have I sat here and have you sat there? And we've seen all the charts and all the discussions about how terrible the deficit is, what it means, leaving this burden to our kids and our grandchildren. We heard all of that rhetoric year after year, and now we have a bill that raises the deficit by $1.4 trillion. And let me be very clear. In my view, I have not the slightest doubt that if this bill, God forbid, is passed, as soon as it is passed, the Republican leadership will come back and say, my God, we have to deal with the deficit, and that's why we're going to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and education. What the rhetoric that we have been hearing from the President and the Republican leadership is very much opposite to what is true. President, Republican leadership have said this is a tax program to benefit the middle class, yet 87 million more middle-class households will see their taxes go up, while 62% of the benefits flow to the top 1%. Top 1%, 62% of the benefits, 87 million middle-class families pay more in taxes. Further, in order to pay for a permanent tax cut for corporations, companies that are today making record-breaking profits, the middle-class tax cuts of the Senate bill would expire by the end of 2025. Permanent tax cuts for corporate America, temporary tax cuts for working families. Adding insult to injury, this legislation provides a huge tax break to corporations that are shifting jobs to China and profits to the Cayman Islands by exempting offshore profits from U.S. taxation, which is known as territorial tax schemes. Now, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ron Johnson and I do not agree on very much, that's for sure. But I do agree with him when he said, and I quote, with a territorial system, there will be a real incentive to keep manufacturing overseas, end of quote. Mr. Chairman, it is not surprising that my Republican colleagues would be pushing legislation to give tax breaks to the very rich, but I really do have a hard time understanding how they are prepared to vote for legislation that would increase the deficit by some $1.4 trillion. Mr. Chairman, the overwhelming majority of the American people do not want to see tax breaks for billionaires and raising taxes for the middle class and laying the groundwork for cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I would hope very much that my Republican colleagues, who for so long have talked about the dangers of the deficit, would in fact join us in voting no for this incredibly horrific and unfair piece of legislation. Thank you.